All right, so this week we are blessed to have Johnny Noir on the call. John Black, as the English folks like to call him, but I call him Johnny Noir. So how you doing, JB?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm doing great. It's always great to see you. I wanted to start this call, John, with some of the history. I mean, you are an international man of mystery. I mean, there's not a lot of people that can say, "Hey, I learned the business here in North America. I then took it overseas and spent a good amount of time in Africa building companies." And so I definitely want to get some of your history. So, I remember meeting you. I'll just start off with this and then I'll punt the ball over to you. I was
Sure.
partnered with a guy. I'm not going to mention his name on this call, but I was in Montreal running a deal, and I didn't really like this guy that much. I don't say that about a lot of people, but I would say that about this guy. And this guy was talking a bunch of smack on Johnny and telling me, "Oh, Johnny sucks." I'm thinking, you know what? I bet you I'm gonna like Johnny. you know, Based on the fact that if he doesn't like you and he doesn't like me, chances are you and I are going to click just fine. And so I remember meeting you and hanging out with you in Quebec City. We won't share any of those stories of Quebec City on this call, but just instantly, I've liked you, I've respected you. You're a hard worker, you're confident, you come through for your guys. So I can't say enough good things about you, Johnny. But give
Thanks,
us a
man.
little bit of your history. And in this history, tell us, how you went over to Africa, why you went over to Africa, how long were you there? So I'm going to probe you with a little bit of these, African stories here.
Okay. Well, I started in the business in Montreal, like you said. Got promoted to assistant manager. I wanted to travel. That was my number one thing. I just wanted to see the world. I was only 22 at the time, so I'm like, I want to see the world. And when I answered the ad in the news, actually, it was in a newspaper. That shows how old I am. Uh, it said expansion to Belgium. So I said, okay, I want to go to Belgium. I don't know if you know, but I actually got promoted to ownership outside of Canada. I got promoted to ownership in Belgium. So I got promoted to assistant manager in Montreal. It took me about 7 months to get to assistant manager. When I got to assistant manager, I had to bank more money to be able to go to Belgium. They already had an office overseas in Belgium. So I banked my money. I went to Belgium. I stayed in Belgium probably for a couple of months. I built my team. I learned how to do the interviews. I did morning meetings. I was gonna open my office, and then somebody that was, Paul, came to Belgium and said, "How, listen, we have an office in Quebec City. It just shut down. We want you to go back to Quebec City and leave Belgium, and we need an owner there now because we had 6 guys from Quebec that were actually in Belgium in that office." So I just got promoted to ownership. I jumped, and then I didn't want to go. I wanted to open my office in Belgium, so I was going to say to him the next day, "Paul, I don't want to go." So he comes in the office the next day and he gives me a plane. He goes, "I'm going to choose one of the Canadians in the office to go back to Quebec City." He had this meeting the day before with us. I'm like, if he chooses me, I don't want to go. And then he comes back and he gives me a plane ticket the next day. He goes, "You're the one going. Yo, congratulations. You're going to Quebec City." I'm like, I had the plane ticket. So me, the idiot, I'm like, okay, I guess he paid for a plane ticket. I'm going to go back. So I went back to, I'm not going to say his name, like that office where you shared with. I had to rebuild a team again. Took me like 3 weeks. I left with like 3 guys. We opened Quebec City, stayed there for only 9 months, promoted somebody, came back to, and then you were in Montreal at that time. I think you left from Montreal. You actually went to Alaska, if I'm not mistaken, in that period. And I went back to Montreal, ran a deal there for probably 2, 3 years, still wanted to travel. So back in the day with DS Max, so I said to myself, I want to travel. And I called Larry and I asked him, I want to travel. I want to open a, he goes, "Oh, you got to bank 100 grand. You got to do this. You got to promote outside deals." So I did everything he asked me, I did. I even beat the record at that time in Montreal. We had like 171 reps in the office with like 85 leaders. So that was like record breaking, like wires of like over 100 grand a week. It was great. I was doing great money, but I still wanted to travel. It's still young. So at 25 years old, he says, "Okay, you could go to Africa if you want to. Which country you want to go to?" I wanted to go to Ivory Coast. Speaks French. Says, "No, we have somebody there." He goes, "I'll bring you to South Africa first. You're going to come at a conference. You're going to see what it looks like." I went to South Africa. I liked it. South Africa was not like Senegal. It's totally different. South Africa probably looked more like Canada or the US than it did Africa, to be honest. So I'm like, oh, this is Africa. This is great. So, and then I went to Senegal. And when I went to Senegal, got there, it was a life-changing experience. It was completely different. And I started operations there and I stayed for 4 years. Now, if you want to go into questions or details, then you gotta shoot me the questions, I guess.
Well, I mean, I forgot all those stories. And like, Belgium, South Africa, like, yeah, you are a very well-traveled man. I mean,
And
so
just for just in when I was in Senegal, I opened up like 5 offices my first 3 months. Recruiting was not a lot, was not a, and it was just easy. And I opened up Cameroon, Guinea, Conakry, if you guys know where that is. I also opened a guy in Tunisia, and I also opened a guy in Mali, which is a different other country. It's all French-speaking countries. So I had operations in 5 different countries when I was there.
and so correct me if I'm wrong, because I've never been to Africa, but I think I heard this. The unemployment's something like 30%.
I don't know now. Depends on, obviously I believe there's 52 different countries in Africa. So every country is going to be fairly different. Some countries they have middle class, some countries they don't. Rather you're really rich or you're really poor. Some countries it's poor, rich, and middle class. Senegal's more, there is a middle class in Senegal. It's not super rich, but it doesn't cost that much money to be there. But there's about 40% of unemployment when I was there. So today I can't tell you, but 40% of when I was there. The first time I put an ad, I had to put the ad in the newspaper. I rented like an office. I put an ad in the newspaper. I called to get a phone line. They were going to install it like in a couple of years, so I couldn't get the phone line. So everybody works with cell phones there. So I'm like, okay. And then I put an ad and I put my address and I said, Canadian company just opened in Senegal. If you're looking for a job, blah, 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 description, show up at this address at between this time and this time. And the way the office was, there was like it was all fenced. So everybody was fenced out. When I went to go open the door, there was 900 people just the other side of the fence for a job interview. So it was crazy.
Wow, 900 people.
Yeah.
And
I
so
know because I made people fill out a piece of paper with their name and stuff.
Because I remember you telling me stories of you're doing an interview and a guy's like, hey, I need a job for my brother, my sister, my cousin. Like, one guy would bring like 10 people, like he's looking for a job for a whole family, not just himself, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you ran your office there. You had over 300 reps or something crazy like that.
Yeah. I don't remember the exact amount. I know it was over 300, probably like 320, something like that. Uh, I don't recommend it. It's kind of like we were selling merchandise, so we had to give merchandise. The screwed up thing is that I learned a lot by being there. Like I love Senegal. It's like my second home. I love Africa. I did like 17 because of Canadian. Every 90 days, I had to get out of the country, go to a different country, get my passport stamp, and then I would come back in the country. So I would take a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and I would go to a different country every 90 days. So I did that 17 times. So I visited a lot of countries. So it was really cool. But I learned because the first day I had like, well, we started with personal. I wanted I brought Canadians with me. Some Canadians were also African, so they were like born in Africa, immigrated to Canada, and then they came back with me. I wanted them to hit the field at first, so we hit the field solo, just the Canadians at first, and then we recruited people personally. And then we started with like 20 guys. Then we placed the ad. We had a shitload of interviews. We invited 100 people. The 100 people showed up. I gave merchandise to 100 people. They left on consignment. So they sign a paper. You go, here's like $300 of merchandise. Go. When you come back, you sell it. When you come back, you pay me what you sold. You keep your commission and give me the rest of the stuff. The issue is that 100 guys left for the field, and I think only 17 came back that night. So I'm like, oh my God, first day, lost a couple $1,000. I'm like, okay, now I'm going to ask for their ID card and then I'm going to give them merchandise. I'm not going to give as much, I'm going to give less. So, there was some growing pains like crazy. It was like crazy.
Funny, I'm just looking at all the faces as you're telling the story, and they're like, "What? Like, what kind of business were you in? Consignment? What are you talking about?" Um, yeah, that's crazy. You get so I'm curious. I mean, I hear it more from the Canadians than I do the Americans. Like, there's a ton of Canadians that are, when you talk big picture and like what you want to do, they all want to expand. It seems for whatever reason, maybe because it's cold or something in Canada. Nobody wants to stay in Canada. They all want to go international. So based on your experience going international, I mean, been there, done that. I used to call you the king of Zaire all the time. I mean,
I
you
remember
are
that.
the king of Zaire, Johnny Noir.
I
Um,
remember you remember when you called me and then there's like a sheep in my office a bit, and then you're
oh,
like, what is that?
oh
So
yeah,
it was
yeah. Go
just
ahead. Tell
no,
that
no.
story. Tell that story.
Yeah, so I just want to keep tabs. So maybe a year later, I called Jamie. Jamie, what's going on? You know, blah blah blah. And then he hears bet bet. He goes, what the hell's that? I go, oh, it's a sheep. He goes, in your office. I go, yeah, it's in my office, but because I would buy a sheep every month and I would keep it in the backyard, feed it, it becomes bigger, and then at the end of the month, whoever I rolled, you know, for the month would leave with the sheep on the first of the month and bring it back to his family. And then he would put it on in a cab and he would just bring it home. It would feed his family for like a week. That's like something extraordinary when you're there. So, but sometimes obviously it's hot down there, so the doors are open and the sheep would just walk in. So that's what happened.
Right. So for those taking notes, write that down. Run a sheep contest in your city and let's see how you
Yeah, I
fare.
don't think it's gonna work that well. No.
Yeah, I see Lenzai writing that down. I'm gonna run a sheep bonus tomorrow. Let's see how that plays out. But yeah, people were running through walls to go get the sheep, huh? Like that was the prize, the biggest prize you could kind of put on the line.
At that time, a sheep would cost probably like a month's salary to somebody. So yeah,
Sure.
not somebody in the field, but somebody like working in a bank. If you have a big one, it's probably like a close to 2 weeks to a month's salary to buy one.
Yeah,
So it's a big deal.
yeah, yeah. That's different experience. So again, back to the international, like so what have you learned from that? And like, what are your plans with your crew with potential international expansion? Because, we had Leopold not so long ago on this call, and he's talking about international expansion. He wants to go back to Africa. So what are your thoughts with all that for the future?
Well, if you want to be global, you gotta go. You gotta take it this way. I know a lot of when you're in America, you know, a lot of people immigrated to America. They want to be in America. It's a big country. There's 330 million people there. Uh, Sufficient amount of money. There's a lot of major cities. You can open offices. There's unlimited, you know, you could probably find, you know, unlimited growth. You can grow as much as you can. In Canada, we're limited by about 7 cities over 1 million people. So there's Toronto with 7 million. If you take all the GTA, Montreal is probably 3.3, just the island. If you take North Shore, South Shore, probably 5 million. Vancouver, 3 million. Calgary, probably 2. Edmonton, maybe 1.2. Ottawa, 1 million. And that's about it. And then the rest is Winnipeg. I think it's below 1 million people. Halifax, about 700,000 people. So for us, Halifax is a big market, but there's only 700,000 people. So sometimes I go to a conference or I go to an R&R, Keys to Success, and somebody's, oh, I'm in a small market, you know. And he goes, I only have like 1 million people in my market. I'm like, okay, well, at that time I was running an office in New Brunswick, Moncton, and there was 100,000 people in the city where my office was. So we're pretty good at, you know, managing in small markets. If you want to have a lot of offices, obviously the option for us, if you want to get to 100, 200, 300 locations, like there's not enough space in Canada to be able to do that. So the other option, and Canada is extremely multicultural, very multicultural, extremely. Nobody looks the same, which is fantastic. Everybody lives together. Everybody accepts everybody, which is fantastic too. And the dynamic is very different here than it would be in the US. But in my office, I have people from France, Morocco, different countries in Africa. We got people from Europe. We have people from England. We have people from everywhere in the world. So if you would take and you would do just in my organization, you would do like a little thing where, okay, what language do you speak? Write it on a piece of paper. And I'm convinced probably we'll have probably like 200 different languages that people speak. So what we did in Canada, there's bigger countries in Europe, like England is what, 100 million people, 90 million people. France, I think, is like 45 million people. Germany is like 80 million people. There's more people in Europe in a smaller space than there is in North America. And in Europe, they got the euro, which is the strongest. I think it's stronger than the US dollar. It's extremely strong and it's stable. And there's a shitload of places. And then what we do, we just represent. If there's competition in the market for telecom, for Interact machines, for anything, if there's competition in the market in the country, and they do a lot of advertising to get new clients, because all the businesses, they want to get new clients. So the way my view of business is, you're going to lose and you're going to win. You just got to win more than you lose, because if it's like, even when you're building a team, you got to win more guys than you lose guys, and obviously you're going to grow. So I would say that a lot of companies at the end of the year, they're like, okay, we lost X amount of customers, but we gain X amount of customers. It's always a fight, and they spend millions and millions of dollars in that fight, and they fight it on TV, newspaper ads, advertising online. They do everything to get new customers. So just for us to go face to face with customers and sign them up, and we only get paid when they get delivered or installed, that for them is a tremendous value, and it has value all around the world. It doesn't matter which country you go to. If there's more than one company selling telecom, then there's a competition, and there's value, financial value, that we could get from turning people over. So I see the opportunity that way more. I don't want to. I would love to move again. Like, just go. I have a house. I'm married. Everything's cool. But even my wife, I'm like, we should leave for a year and go in a different country, just for the experience. Open a bunch of offices, leave somebody in charge, and then move maybe to another country. Open that one. And then that's how your organization will become like 10,000 offices. You're not going to get that in the US alone. So depends how big you see. But I know, back in the day with DS Max, I know a guy that opened Russia. His first year in Russia, he opened 133 offices himself. Maybe not a place I would go now, but there's Poland. There was 250 locations in 1 year. Like crazy amount of offices were open because there's a market, there's a lot of recruiting. Spain, Portugal, you name it. There's so many countries in Europe, and they're small. Everything's closed. The gate, not the gates, but everything's open. It's free trade between the countries. I think if we're not there, I think we're stupid. And then there's massive companies that are there also that could afford, obviously, our services, and they want it too.
Hey, bringing back some old memories. I remember, DS Max was in 140 countries around the world, right? With 100,000 plus reps scattered all over the world. So here's the roots of our business, and most of you probably haven't heard things like that. But I remember asking Larry, because Al Basada, there's a blast from the past, John, but he's a struggling owner in Canada. He moves to China, and in a short period of time, he had 1,500 offices in China. It's like, what? I mean, how did this happen? And Larry was saying, he goes, listen, the hardest place to run this kind of business is the United States. He goes, if you can get great here and then you go overseas, you're going to be an animal going overseas. And part of it is the cost. He's like, hey, listen, in some countries, you can open up offices for a few $100s, not thousands and tens of thousands of dollars, but we're talking about hundreds to open up new locations. And in some countries, like think of Mexico, think of all the people you meet in Mexico that are trying to hustle you all kinds of stuff. In some countries, like face-to-face sales is just part of the culture. Like people are like, oh, I can't do sales, I can't do rejection. You wouldn't hear that in Mexico, people in interviews, they wouldn't say that. That's just how it is. So that's interesting, John. I mean, that would talk about an interesting play, bouncing around to different countries, leaving somebody to run each country, and it's like playing the game of Risk. You really are building overrides in all these interesting parts of the world. And if you've got a strong, stable currency like, the euro, you're in great shape.
I always say to my guys when they open their first office, I said, don't open your office in the city where you want to live, because you'll never want to move. It's not fair for the guys that you recruit locally. So I always say, go move to somewhere you don't want to live, go open an office there. And then if you really don't like it, you'll probably promote somebody way faster because you're going to put in the work to get your ass out of there. So that's my view on it.
Yeah. So just to shift gears a little bit, I mean, I could talk to you for a long time about international expansion, and I guess it's kind of been talking about this for a lot of years in the business, and obviously Gary and Vera have really wanted to master Canada and the US, and then hey, you need somebody who's got some guts and somebody with a good track record to then go overseas. I've heard you talk a lot about India, that you wanted to head over to India because that's a very large English speaking market that we could certainly tap into. But just to shift gears for the sake of time, in America we experienced COVID, obviously, well, the world experienced COVID, but our lockdown in the United States, and I'm not talking about having to wear masks in stores or B2B, but what was it, March, April, May, and we're starting to come out of the woodwork in June. You guys in Canada you experienced 4 lockdown. You're smiling. I mean, I have a feeling you have a little post-traumatic stress disorder. They talk COVID, but you guys were shut down 4 different times, and you were basically, tell me if I'm wrong, you were locked down for about a year and a half.
But this way, January 2022, my office was shut down.
January of 2022. Like COVID
Yeah.
started in March of 2020.
Yeah.
And in January of 2022, you couldn't hit the field.
No.
Yeah.
We hit the field for 3 months. They would shut us down. We hit the field another 3 months. They shut us down. It was really, really tough. It was hard on, the owners. We didn't get any, well, we did get some financial help from the government, obviously, like loans and stuff like that. But, you still got to pay your rent. You're not operating, but you got to pay your rent. Yeah. So it was a good shit show. Yeah.
Yeah. And so again, I was privy to seeing the numbers and like, okay, how, what's all happening in Canada. And so, you guys got beat up for a long period of time,
Yeah.
And then, so just to shift gears, so let's forget about the post-traumatic stress disorder. And so now it's like, you are running the fastest growing org in the company. You've got big players on your team. I mean, I hope you guys all get a chance to meet these guys. Like Moriak, like this guy is a stud. I love Moriak. Leopold, we were introduced to Leopold. Tyler, hotshot new guy. Amal's going to get promoted. Bakar, Sammy. I mean, so you obviously are a stud recruiter, John. I mean, what tips do you have for us on getting some of these players? And when I say players, again, Amal's about to get promoted. Leo's getting promoted. John's already surpassing senior national standards. So, I'm not exactly sure what needs to happen for that, but you might even blow past that and get to the next stratosphere of promotions in the business. Moriak getting $100,000 wires. I think he's right now pacing as the number 2 owner in the entire company. So what are your tips for us on just being a stud recruiter, a magnet for talent?
I think it's more like I told you this before. I think it's more you have to be good at building relationships. I'm better at retaining than I am at recruiting, if that makes any sense. I like to, obviously, you're always going to recruit who you are. So you can recruit, you're never going to recruit who you want, right? So you can say, I want this guy, I want to recruit him, but let's say you're a 7 out of 10. Well, guess what? You're going to recruit 6 out of 10 and lower, 7 out of 10 and lower. So I think that the key is to work on yourself and make your number better. And the more you're going to get their number better, the sharper person that you could obviously recruit. So I would say that recruiting is less about the people you interview, but more about the self-education you do on yourself. If you have a student mentality, obviously the killer of big success is small success. A lot of owners, they get into ownership. They got this great first year. They start doing well. They promote one outside deal. They got a bit of money in the bank. They're like, okay, I know this gig. I know it all. And then you don't become very attractive anymore because you don't have that student mentality. So you don't want to listen to anybody. If you can't listen to your peers or you can't listen to your consultant or advice, then obviously you're definitely not listening to your guys. And if you don't listen to your guys, because everybody likes to share their own information, like everybody wants to have a voice, I think you're gonna damage the quality of the people you're gonna recruit. And I think you need to self-educate yourself and become who you want, try to become who you want to recruit and you'll get somebody like yourself. If you don't like yourself, like where you're at, or you got things to work on, well, work on those things if you want to recruit a better person. So that's my view on it. Now, is there techniques or interviews or things that you could do? Yes, I'm sure there's probably like 100 different things. I probably do different things every single week. I think people are attracted. I always thought that being talented is people would be impressed with if you're talented. But if you have work ethic, I think you're going to inspire people. So I think that work ethic inspires people, and I think talent just impresses people. I want to be more the person that inspires than the person that impresses. That's why this is something really I like. If I do, like, I like to say that I don't know. I like to say that to my guys. I like to, if I make a mistake, I will go out of my way to make sure that my guys know that I screwed up, because most of us, we don't like it when our guys make a mistake and they don't tell you. That you don't like when guys, what did you do here? And he's like, oh, it's not me, it's him. And he starts pointing fingers everywhere and gives you excuses. But the excuses that he gives you, you got to understand, it actually comes from you. It's your fault because you lacked leadership by not admitting your mistakes. So you're coaching your generation of owners not to make any mistakes and try to be perfect like you are. And what happens in this scenario is that, oh, I was always in the field. I was never late. I always rang the bell. Some owners will tell you the stories and it goes on and on and on. And everybody's like, wants to be like them. So as soon as they screw up and they don't do something right, they'll lie. They'll lie. They'll give an excuse. It's never their fault. But for real, you lack leadership because you cannot take the blame and you need to show that you're perfect. So I think good people will attract good people. So make yourself better. And there's a lot of people I would love to recruit, but I can't because I'm not good enough yet. But one day, maybe I'll be good enough for them to start my business. That's the way I see it. So I don't know if that's an answer that impacts your guys or you could learn from it, but that's the way I see it.
Yeah. No, it's just, it's funny. I'm in Dominican, right? And I'm like, hey, well, with that little bubble bath party we had going on, there was like a wall of bubbles. So I kept swimming into different groups. And when I swam into your group, there's Bakar, there's Moriak, there's just something about your guys. You have some very special people on your team. Moriak telling me how he spent a month in Benin and bought 2 parcels of land and built some mansions on that land for his family and stuff like that. Like he's a great, and then he's talking about how he doesn't have a recruiter. He does his own. Here's the guy running a $3 million ICL that doesn't have a recruiter, who does all his own recruiting and keeps his costs. He's still cost sensitive. Like I'm kind of shocked how he pinches pennies, like he's not spending anything that he doesn't have to spend. Like very
that doesn't come from me though, so I'm not responsible for that.
Yeah, that much I figured out for sure. He's but I don't know what it is. He's certainly spending lots of his hard-earned cash back on his family back in Africa, but again, there's just something really resourceful about your people and good hearts on these guys, Johnny. So anything on that, like just you're attracting people that just have a real good heart? Would you say that's a characteristic that you have? Again, people attract who they are.
Yeah, well, obviously they got to attract. Because I travel so much, I speak many. I speak like French. Obviously, I speak a little bit of Wolof, which is an African dialect. I travel so much that when I do an interview, just by somebody's name, I'll know exactly where he's from. I self-educate myself on the countries, like what's the capital, like how people live there. I travel so much that I self-educated about the world. So when I'm interviewing somebody, I could talk about their own town and tell them stuff about their own country. They're like, oh my God, like how do you know this? I never met a guy that knows all these things. And I'm like, okay. So it's interesting. You understand? So they get attracted to that. So I'm really good at attracting. My team is extremely multi-diverse. Like I got people from Africa. I got a first consultant on my team, Leopold's from Africa. I met him there. I brought him over with me. I got Amal that he's born in Africa, but he's from Indian descent. I got Veronica. Like I got a multitude. I got Asian people. I got anywhere in the world, Moroccans, Arabic, I got everything on my team because I love diversity. And I think because I got the diversity and I got sharp people that attracts themselves diversity, I think that's why, I don't like it when everybody looks the same in an office. I think you're limiting the IQ of your business to what you know. And if everybody comes from the same town or everybody thinks the same way, well, my advice, never do business together because you're not going to get different solutions for one problem. So I just like the diversity. That's it.
Mm.
And I think that attracts people. And I think also I have a lot of immigrants in my crew. And I feel that the immigrants that come here are extremely educated. They come for school. They're extremely educated. They have a lot to bring. Sometimes, like Leopold has a PhD. You can't practice surgeon dentist in Canada. So, sometimes we don't attract the right people because we don't want them. Sometimes I don't know if you don't want them. You want them, or you don't understand them, or you don't understand where they're from, and you can't relate with them sometimes. And I think that's an issue. I think you need to self-educate yourself on the world if you want to attract the world towards you.
That's great, John.
Thank you.
You dropped a lot of wisdom on this call, and I don't think you have anybody on your team from Saskatchewan, though. I don't know why you discriminate against the Saskatchewanese.
Actually, I do.
You do?
Yes, I do.
Okay, one?
Yeah. Well, there's only 5 people there, so I got the best one, right?
You got 20%. That's good. Well, John, thanks for sharing your time. Thanks for, setting the pace, fastest growing org, in the company, and how you handled COVID and just your thoughts internationally and the caliber of people you're bringing on the team. So thanks for doing what you're doing, John. Thanks for giving us your time here today.
Thank you.
Okay. See you guys.
Bye.